Good evening, everyone. My name is Sam Nasser, and this is the Cleveland C# VB.NET user group. A little bit about the group. We meet every month. The meetings are free of charge and open to the public, and we cover any and all topics related to .NET. You can find the meeting information posted on meetup.com at the bottom of the slide there. I'd like to give a big thank you to our sponsors, PostSharp and DevExpress, for sponsoring the post-meeting giveaways, and we're going to be using the eval form to raffle those off. Also like to thank the .NET Foundation for sponsoring the website hosting, and NIS Technologies for sponsoring the meeting space online. We'd also like to thank Manning.com for providing a 35% discount on a selection of books, and those can be found at deals.manning.com, and the link will be made available in the chat shortly afterwards. Some general information, please keep in mind, first and foremost, participation is encouraged. The only stupid question is the one not being asked. So if you have a question in mind, feel free to jump in, and chances are, if you have a question, someone else probably has that same question. So don't hesitate. However, kindly ask you to mute your microphones when not speaking to avoid any background noise. And we like to keep it casual but organized, meaning jump in with any comments or questions at any point in time. However, we want to give enough time for our speaker to go through the slides and the demo. And as mentioned earlier, the presentation is being recorded and will be posted on my YouTube channel with the link made available in chat later. And so that brings us to our feature presentation, ASP.NET Core and Microsoft Graph by Dan Wahlin from Microsoft. Dan is a principal cloud developer advocate at Microsoft. And he focuses on integrating services across the Microsoft Cloud ecosystem. He's a developer, architect, technology trainer, author, and public speaker. And I'm surprised I got all that out in one breath. So needless to say, he's heavily involved in the development realm. He's also a former CEO and lead architect at a consulting and training company. And you can find his blog at blog.codewithdan.com. And he's also found on Twitter as well at Dan Wahlin. And so with that, Dan, I'd like to welcome you and thank you for taking the time to present. Let me go ahead and make you presenter.
All right, well, great to be here. Go ahead and make sure I pick the right screen here now. Not that one, not that one. Yep. Anyone else have like too many monitors at times? I do, unfortunately, so. All right. Let me dig this up here and we'll be off and running. Okay, cool. So first off, thanks, Sam, for the invite. Sam, quick story on that. When he reached out the second time, I noticed he had reached out a first time, and I just don't check my Twitter DMs that much. So I had to apologize to Sam and be like, okay, I'll do this one though, because I did see the second one. So thanks for having me. Great to be here with everybody. So Sam, first off, I'm super impressed. You actually said my last name right. That is like, that never happens. So yeah, my name's Dan Wahlin. Everyone always says Wahlin or Wahlin or some other pronunciation. So I don't know if you're just that good, Sam, or if you went and looked it up, but either way, you got it right.
Well, so, I kind of used LinkedIn with the sound feature, so that kind of gave it away. So yeah, that helped a lot. Yeah.
I don't even think
Otherwise
I know
it would have been Dan Wahlin.
Yeah, well, at this point in life, I'm just like, yeah, that's good enough, close enough. But so as Sam mentioned, I work at Microsoft. That's kind of my day job. I'm going to tell a little story though before we get going here, because it's going to tie into this content. The problem with working at Microsoft is when you give a talk about Microsoft technologies, people assume you're kind of doing it because that's your job. And in all fairness, this is a technology I do work with, what we're going to talk about here at work. But so I ran, before coming to Microsoft, I ran a consulting and training company for about 20 years, actually. And it was great, but I traveled a ton for 20 years. And any of you that travel or used to travel with your job, you know that gets a little bit old. So I only mention this story because this is one of those technologies, I knew about it, but I never ever used it from a consulting, training, architecture standpoint. And if you asked, well, why, Dan? Why didn't you use it? And I don't mean .NET. I was really into .NET ever since, I got started in .NET. I wrote a book on it that started at '99, actually, believe it or not. C# used to be called cool, And ASP.NET was ASP Plus back then. And it was all command line at the time. There was no Visual Studio, of course. I think Visual InterDev was still around. So that's how old I am. But anyway, so I've done tons of .NET over the years, but I never ever did anything with what we're going to cover today. And the reason I tell this quick little story is I regret it, because it was one of those I didn't know what I didn't know type things. And 100% of our consulting side of our business was all based on custom apps, and that's where this fits really, really well. And I'm sure a lot of you are working on custom apps. So having said that, everything I'm going to say today, I'm one of those folks. I've been at Microsoft 2 years now. I did a little got done with the company when COVID hit and said, I'm done. I'm tired of traveling and I'm going to take a break. So I kind of did a little don't do anything for a while, got bored, COVID hit. I said, well, I got to do something else. So here I am now. The whole reason for that, though, is that what I'm going to tell you today, think of it as Dan before he got to Microsoft versus Dan, the Microsoft guy, right? I'm one of those that I'll just tell you what I think. And if I like it, I'll tell you. And if I don't, I'll tell you. It doesn't really matter where I work. I do like this technology. I will say that. I wish I would have used it more. So what we're going to do is talk about what is Microsoft Graph all about. Now, what I'm going to do, thanks, Sam, for the slide you mentioned. We'll try to keep it organized, but also kind of friendly and interactive. So what I'm going to do, I have some sections before like demos and all that. And what I'll do is check the chat. I got to figure out how to I see it. I'll check the chat and stuff like that. And then we can officially turn on your mic if you have a question at that point. That way we can kind of get rolling and stay on track, and then we'll take a break and ask questions and then keep going and try to be organized. I'm going to pretend to be organized, folks, if that's all right. So what we're going to talk about here, Microsoft Graph, you can go to docs.microsoft.com/graph, and I'm not going to go there right now, but if you want to, you can check it out. Now, the first thing people ask is, oh, I know Graph. That's that query mechanism where I could get a whole subset of records and nested and all that fun stuff, but do it like on the client side, for example. We're not talking about that type of a Graph API. Microsoft Graph is really about integrating organizational data into different types of applications. It could be custom apps. I don't know if any of you do like Power Apps or Power Platform at work. It could be that. It could be Dynamics 365 if you're doing any of that. I mean, the sky's the limit here. And of course, the custom app, it could be written in anything, any language. We're here for .NET, of course, and that's what I'm going to focus on. But there's SDKs for Go and all kinds of languages. So imagine let's just take a sales team, and you're building a custom sales app because there's not enough sales apps out there already. But let's say you are building something custom that ties these customer and sales people together. Well, what do your salespeople do on a given day? Well, they're interacting with other people in the organization, right? Some of these people have very specialized skills, and they need to know about them. They're creating and working with files all day long. They're emailing or chatting. If they're on Microsoft Teams, for example, then we can even get to that, you'll see. But email is a big part of talking with the customer. And then, of course, you have meetings with some customers. You might have notes about those meetings. And we have all this data that's out there. But how many times have you thought about tying that into what the app actually does? And I'll tell you what I mean by that as we move along here. So the 4 items you see here, people, files, email, well, it's kind of 5, email, chat, and meetings and notes. That's just a small subset of what you could actually get to. Now, you might be like, why would I care? Well, let's talk about that. And this is where going back, taking off my Microsoft hat and putting on my previous consulting hat, this is why I kind of kick myself for not getting more into this, because it's just a huge opportunity, in my opinion. All right, so let's talk about a little bit more what I mean, and then we'll get into what is Microsoft Graph. So let's say that you build this app, and it's this salesperson, customer type of app. Well, one of the key things, of course, if you're going to interact with data, especially data that could be sensitive, is you'll, of course, have to have some type of identity. Now, I'm going to be using Azure Active Directory today for the demos, and that's actually what Microsoft Graph just fits in like a glove with. So to kind of be aware of that. But then a little later, as we talk more about this, we're going to talk about tokens and how those could be used to then call into this Microsoft Graph kind of ecosystem, if you will. And really, Microsoft Graph is just RESTful API calls, if you haven't seen it before, and you'll see it coming up. Now, why would I do this though? Well, how many times, just today maybe, and I could raise my hand here because I've done it today. How many times have you been working on something in some app, whatever it is, and then you need to go find data that's related to that, that's like in your email, or you're off to search for a chat. You're like, I know I did this chat, but I just can't remember when or who, or I just had that today as well, actually. I was running behind. I was in another meeting this morning that ran over like 5 minutes. So I was trying really quickly to find the chat for the other meeting I'm late for so I could chat them and say, hey, I'm coming. I'll be there in a sec. So those are just two simple examples: chats, email. What about files, right? I work a lot with Word and Word Online. That's, if you work at Microsoft, there's a lot of documents floating around. And I can't tell you how many times I just have to go to office.com, search for what it is I'm trying to find, and then find it, open it, and then get to what I want. Well, how cool would it be, if appropriate, to just bring that into the app where the user's working, especially in a salesperson type of app. If they're sending a lot of documents, and let's say the customer is Acme Corp, well, how cool would it be to have an option? Maybe it doesn't do it and show it all at once, but maybe they click a button or something that says get related content. And that then goes out and finds emails to Acme Corp. It finds files to Acme Corp. It finds chats. It finds whatever it is that's out there, brings it into the app, of course, lets you filter it and sort it and all that fun stuff. Well, now you don't have to go jumping around to find all this related data. It's just right there at your fingertips. Now, that's just a small kind of set the stage for what we're going to talk about today. All right. So moving on, Graph is really this kind of interconnected, it's a single secured endpoint is what they call it. You go through this Microsoft Graph API, and then you can get to all this different data. You can get insights and information about people and meetings and files, chat conversations, group information, org charts. I mean, you name it. It's huge what you can do. So to kind of start this off, what I'm going to do is show you some of these endpoint URLs, URIs, whatever you want to call it, show you what's possible, and then we're going to dive into a .NET app. And this particular app we're going to talk about, it's actually broken out into 3 Microsoft Learn exercises. One's for email, one's for calendar events, and one's for files. Now I'm going to focus on the email and the calendar events just because we have an hour or so today. But all the codes there and the step-by-step instructions, if you also want to bring in like OneDrive for business files, you could even bring those in if it was appropriate for your app. Okay, so there's kind of 5 steps to get going with this. Number 1, you need to know about the documentation. And I've already given another link, but here's an even shorter one, aka.ms/m-graph. That's a given, right? I mean, we're all pretty good at that. But then number 2 is what we're going to look at right now. It's something called Microsoft Graph Explorer. And this is one of the cooler tools I think we've released online to let you play with things. We're doing a little bit more of this, I've noticed, with some other, like I work a lot with something called Azure Communication Services. That allows you to embed audio, video, chats. You can send SMS messages, do full-on phone calls right from your apps. And the reason I mention that is they also have this kind of playground now that's in the browser where you can actually play with it before you decide to invest any time coding it, which is super cool. Well, Graph has this as well. It's called Graph Explorer, and we'll go there in just a sec. Now, you're all here probably for .NET, so there is a .NET SDK. That's what I'll be using in the demos coming up here. And then there's a little work you'd have to do in Azure Active Directory. I'll show you if you haven't done that before. It's literally, I don't know, 2 minutes or so of a little setup you do. Basically, you just have to register your application that's going to call Microsoft Graph. And then you use the SDK. you call the APIs, and there's a nice fluent API. We can do this dot this dot this type chained approach, and we'll see that in a moment. All right, so what we're going to do, I have an even shorter link here for the Graph Explorer. There's another one here, but I don't know. I guess I felt it was too long. So there's one called GE. So I'm going to run off to this browser. And if you want to do this with me, you can just go to AKMS/GE Graph Explorer, and that'll get you to exactly where I'm at right now. And what Graph Explorer will allow us to do, I don't know why it jumped there, and of course it decided not to load. Okay, there we go. I think that's my end. Is it will let you play with, you'll notice there's all these categories, and this isn't even all of them, by the way. This is just the demos they have. It'll let you hit these APIs right in the browser and actually see the data. Now, some of these you'd have to get access tokens. You'd have to basically log in. You'll notice right off to the right here, there's a sign in. And so one of the things you can do if you're new to this is you can actually get a free developer tenant, it's called. So I don't know if any of you at work like have, maybe an Azure subscription, or maybe you have you signed up for the free one to play around. Well, you can do that with Microsoft 365 as well, which is kind of where Microsoft Graph lives. And actually that gives you access to Word and Outlook and all that fun stuff for development purposes, of course. But anyway, so I am currently in a developer tenant right now, meaning that I signed up with kind of a fake account and I just use this for development. That's why my browser is kind of colored a little interesting up top here. So I'm in that tenant right now. But if you're interested, you can go sign up. It's totally free and you get access to tons of stuff to do what I'm now gonna show you. All right, now with that, I haven't logged in. So right now, everything I do here is gonna be just with their kind of test tenant. You'll see it says tenant sample right here. I'm currently using the sample account, but it's good enough to get started. So let's go to the get started. We'll expand that, and I'm gonna click on my profile. So, what's the first thing on every website you go to that you get? You log in, and then usually in the upper right somewhere, you'll see either your profile picture or your name or something like that, right? Pretty standard. So if I click on my profile, now keep in mind, this is the sample data right here. In fact, it kind of reiterates that right now. Then this is the type of data you would get back. Let me see if I can make that a little bigger for you. Right here. So Megan Bowen is very famous because Megan is the sample person. You'll notice up top, this is the actual API programmatically you would use to get that logged in user's profile. Now, there's also a My Profile beta. We're not going to go into that, but they have some of the upcoming features you can experiment with as well. Now, what's so cool about this is, I want to get Megan's photo, for example. Well, look at the API up here. It's me/photo. Now, if I just did /photo, watch what happens here. We'll run this. This will just give you back the JSON with the height and the width and the URL to the photo. You'll see that right up top here. But if we go in and do, let me just click back on it, $value, that will say, no, don't give me the JSON, give me the actual byte stream, if you will, of the data for that image. And of course, you could then use that, which I'm going to do momentarily, to embed that user's profile picture, of course, if you want to do it custom. Now let's go to my email or my mail here. So again, this is Megan's kind of fake mail, but it would be what you would expect. You'll get, if we scroll on down, there's the subject, your digest, here's the body preview, somewhere in here's the body right there. Notice it's HTML format for the content type, pretty standard. And there's, all the body in this email. So what's really cool here is, let's say that in our app, we wanted to pull in every email that had Acme Corp, either in the body or in the subject or something like that within a date range, maybe in the last, 3 months, last quarter, let's say. Well, we could actually do that with this type of a query. And notice it's just me/messages. Now, anytime you see me, it of course represents the logged in or signed in user. So kind of be aware of that. Kind of goes without saying. I mean, we wouldn't be able to get the email otherwise, I would hope. But that's what you can do. Now I could also go and get like OneDrive files if I wanted and pull those in. And then the list just goes on and on and on. I can get, who does Megan report to? Diago Siciliani, I guess. And my to-do list tasks, you can tie into your to-do if you use that at all. And the list just goes on. I mean, if we scroll into here, like I do quite a bit with Microsoft Teams now, and if you wanted to programmatically create a team, you could use Microsoft Graph to do that. You want to view what are the joined teams that Megan is part of here. Well, it looks like she's part of HR Task Force, Business Development, some launch team. Looks like that's it. Who are the members of a given team? Channels. Now, those not using Teams, you may not care about this, but those that are, you can even send messages to Teams channels or chats or whatever you want. I mean, all kinds of cool stuff. We just did one of my colleagues named Aicha. She and I just did a talk at Build, which was like May. Just did. Geez, it's like August now, isn't it? It feels like we just did that. But anyway, and it was this collaborative app where we needed to know the user's presence information. In other words, were they busy in a meeting? Were they out of office? Were they available? And the reason, because in this collaborative app, if somebody was detected to be available, we could send a message to them in Teams programmatically through this custom app and say, hey, come join us. It looks like you're available. Do you want to come join us in this collaboration session? And multiple people could collaborate in this app. It was something called Fluid Framework is what we used. So long story short, we used Microsoft Graph, not only for the profile info, the simple stuff, but we also used it to detect the user status and to send a message into Teams to invite them to come join. And that could all be done through Microsoft Graph. And again, I can go on and on and on with all this cool stuff you could do, but suffice it to say, it's a really robust API. Now, I'm not going to bore you. We're going to get to code here just a little bit, but I could sign in with my developer tenant here. In fact, that's my developer tenant. And then I could do the same thing, but against real data if I wanted. So it's a great way to play with this. So that's kind of what Microsoft Graph does. Now, I do want to mention that you'll notice up here, like modify permissions, access token, all this type of stuff. Some of these APIs, you're going to have to do like a put request or they're not all GET or a delete request or something like that. Some of these are going to require an access token that has certain privileges. I'm going to talk more about that in just a moment as I get to the code, but that'll get you thinking here. Okay, so if we wrap this part up, what we've done so far is talked about Microsoft Graph is a way to get into your organizational data and either interact with it or even pull it in to like where your users work every day so that they don't have to jump to all these apps to find things. I personally think this is why I kicked myself for not doing it before, because gosh, there were so many scenarios I can think of now where I should have recommended this, where we wrote something like custom and we could have just used something like this. But hey, I wasn't really into the whole Microsoft 365 scene back then. So, all right, so let's move on, and then I'll take some, I'll check if there's any questions. I see one chat. I don't know if it's a question or not, but we'll go back to that in a moment. So let me really quick, let me exit and go back in here. Let's talk then about, oh, it's gonna make me start at the beginning, okay. Let's talk about email first. Like, how would you get to email from a .NET standpoint? So we know we can do email and conversations and files and calendar events and tasks and security even info. It's pretty crazy what you can get to. But let's say we just want to focus on the email for now. Well, the way this works is if we have the customer application, remember we have to authenticate. Obviously, if you're going to get into organizational data, it has to be super secure. That goes without saying. So we would need to get an access token. Now that means there's a little bit of setup, as I mentioned earlier, with Azure Active Directory. And I'm going to show you that if you want to do this for real, it's not hard at all. And we even have some great step-by-step screenshots of what you would do. Take you less than 2 minutes, 2 to 3, I'd say. Now, once we have that access token, it would have what's called scopes inside of it, which we're going to talk about in a moment. And scopes basically would say, I can get to the user profile, or I can get to the user email, but read only. Or maybe I can get to the user email and I can even send email. The user, like if they're logged in, could have a web app where they could actually send email through the app. That's also possible. In this case, though, we're just going to assume we want to pull in email into the app. And then in the app I'm going to show you, especially given the time we have, can't cover everything, but suffice it to say, you can do filtering and ordering and date ranges and all kinds of normal stuff, just like you would do with database queries, pretty much. Okay, so I mentioned that we have these learn, they're called Microsoft Learn modules or Learn paths. This Learn path has 3 modules. One is email and how to use that with ASP.NET Core. One is OneDrive for Business files, if you want to bring those into an app, or even upload files from an app. And the other is calendar events. Now, we're going to talk about 2 of those 3 today, but the code I'm going to show you has all 3 if you want to play with it. So the link, and Sam will have to figure out a way to get you the slides and stuff. I'll send them to you after or something. But the link here will get you to this Learn module. I'm going to go ahead and just run over here real quick and kind of show you. So this is what it looks like. And what I'm going to do now is go into this guy. I'm not going to really show you much here, but all the steps would be there to get this going with the code I'm going to show you. So if you want to go through it and do it hands-on, then you can go, check this out. Now, the first thing we're going to have to do is configure Azure Active Directory, and I'm not going to bore you with that. I have it open here. In general, what we would do, though, is we would go into the Azure portal. You could log in with your developer tenant if you got one of those free ones I was telling you about. That's what I'm in right now. Go to Azure Active Directory. And then on the left here, you'll notice app registrations. Some of you have probably done this. And you'll notice I have several. These are mostly just demo presentations. And then from here, I'd create a new registration. So what we'll do is we'll walk you through step by step, exactly what I just showed you, how to create a new registration. And then there's a few things you're going to pick. We're doing a web app in this case, for example. Some of you might be using front-end technologies like React, Angular, Vue, just TypeScript, whatever. There's a SPA, single page application option in the dropdown as well. But in this case, we're going to do a pure server side. It's a Razor Pages. I don't know, anybody using Razor Pages? I love Razor Pages. Like, I don't know why they don't get more attention because I think they're just awesome. But anyway, and then there's a few IDs we're going to get here. All right, I saw at least one there was. So there's a client ID and there's also a tenant ID or director ID right here. All right, so anyway, this will walk you through step by step, and literally it takes like 2-3 minutes to go through it. It's like click, 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 enter a few things, done. Now, the app that I'm gonna run, and that's why I wanna show you a little bit of this, the next exercise here, and this will get us pretty close up to where the app is, there's a repo. I have a shorter link for you, I'll give you a little later here. But what we're gonna do just locally is we're going to take those IDs that I showed back here. So if we went into this one, for example, well, the one we're going to use is actually this guy, ASP.NET Core MS Graph App. And you'll notice this application ID, and then if I go to certificates and secrets, I also have a secret called ASP.NET Core App Secret I created. And then it doesn't show you the whole secret after you create it, of course, but I have that, and it's already registered. Now, to do that, in production, we would probably put that info up in like Azure Key Vault, or you'd put it somewhere secure, of course. You're not going to check it into source control, obviously. So we, of course, can just leverage .NET user secrets. And I'm sure some of you have used these basically to store it outside of source code on our machine so that we don't accidentally check in the client secret. Client ID wouldn't be a big deal, but client secret would. So we kind of separate those. What we're going to do, you're going to see in a moment then, is I've already done this step. And now what I'm going to do is go to the code and kind of walk you through how would you get started with this. Okay, but if you're interested, you can walk through this step. And then there's a few other, let me go back. I clicked something wrong. There we go. Anytime you see exercise in here, that's kind of the hands-on. And then these sections in between, if you haven't seen Microsoft Learn before, they're kind of like tell you about what you're going to do first, and then you do it. So, all right. Now with that, let me go to the chat. And can you do OneNote? You know, I've never done OneNote. I think you can. Here's how to answer that. I'll actually show you 2 ways you could answer that. I have never used Graph to get OneNote data, so I won't pretend I'm good at that. But let's go see if any of the demos have it, because they may. Yeah, right there, OneNote. I was going to say I thought I've seen it before, but I haven't actually used it. So it looks like you can get my notebooks, my sections, my pages. You can even programmatically create sections, pages, and stuff like that. Now, that's just the demos, though. There's way more than that. If you go to the Microsoft Graph homepage, you just go to docs.microsoft.com/graph if you want, and that would get you there. I think it's in develop. Yeah, right here, API v 1.0 reference. I'll put a link in the chat for you. Okay, so if you go to that link in the chat, and this is good to know because keep in mind that Microsoft Graph Explorer, that's just the stuff they expose to play with. There's way more than that. I mean, it's a huge API surface out there. So notice you can work with users, groups, applications, calendars. Change notifications is awesome. Remember that presence thing I was telling you about? The way we knew if somebody left a meeting and then their presence in Teams changed to available was you can hook up Microsoft Graph to like Azure Event Hubs. And then through Azure Event Hubs, you can get notified that, hey, Sam is now available. And then what we did is wrote a little toast message that would pop up. And then we would send Sam a message, say, come join us. Whereas if Sam was in the meeting, we wouldn't bug him. So anyway, that's cool. You can tie into an amazing amount of data and know when it changes with change notification. And it's real time, by the way. It's just like boom, boom, boom. I wish we had more time. There's so much cool stuff. But anyway, so let's go down to OneNote. Well, there's notes, notebooks, sections. Okay, I guess it's probably in here, Sam. Yeah, it is. OneNote REST API. So it looks like it's in the notes. And then, yeah, here's all the stuff you can do with OneNote. I haven't done it. So if you do it, let me know, because that's not one I've had to touch. Now, we're talking about email. Well, there's all kinds of stuff you can do with email. I mean, you can go in and work with attachments. You can obviously view email, like list messages. And this kind of shows you how you would get started. It's just me/messages. In fact, we're going to use the .NET SDK. You don't even have to write the URL. You could just use the SDK because it knows how to call the API. So I'll show you that in a moment. Okay, so with that, excellent question there, Sam. Anyone else have any questions so far? Does everybody kind of get what this is all about so far? I think I had a couple more. Yeah, I'm going to show you one more thing, and then we're going to look at some code. Okay.
Hey, Dan, I have a question.
Yeah.
So a lot of the sales staff, they like to use text messaging for corresponding with customers. Is this something that we can tie it into?
So this one, not so much text messaging, but yes, we have that. It's actually a really new feature. Let me show you where you can go for that, and I'll chat it for you. So if you go to docs.microsoft.com, and then I'll show you, I've done a bunch of videos on this. I just did one on SMS. and search for communication services. This is what I wanted right there. I'll put this in the chat. So with ACS, it's called, because nobody likes to say Azure Communication Services 10 times. You can actually do SMS messages, and you can even have two-way. You know how sometimes you'll get a text message and then you can type like stop. I don't know about all of you. I'm still getting all the dang political stuff every day, every freaking day. It's like, no, I don't want it. I'll put this in the chat too for you, Sam. So yeah, you can, in fact, this is the video I just recently did. There's me. But it's super easy to send SMS messages, and it's actually super. You can get your own phone number for $2 a month is what it costs. $2 a month, your own toll-free number. Nice. Anyway, I don't want to digress too much, but hopefully that helps a little bit there. All right. Okay, so let me wrap up this part, and then we'll go to code. So here's the general workflow for what I'm going to show you. You'd obviously use like Visual Studio or .NET New on the command line to create your app, right? You register your app in Azure Active Directory. I showed you the basics of that. It's a little boring, which is why I'm not going to go through it, and we just don't have unlimited time. But in like 3 minutes max, you'll have your app registered, and then you'll get those two IDs, a client ID and a client secret that you'll have. Then you got to configure your middleware. Now, this particular demo is ASP.NET Core. All right, can you do this with .NET Framework? Absolutely. I'm sure some of you still have plenty of .NET Framework at work. No problem. But just know that I'm going to be doing .NET Core with this particular demo. So you configure what's called the middleware. Those using .NET Core, you know all about this, but for those that maybe don't use middleware, think of it like a subway stop. The request, that's the subway going this way, hits these stops. Well, the first stop might check your credentials, right? And if you don't have the right credentials, you might be kicked off the subway. The next one may do some logging. The next one may do some other thing, check. And then finally you get to the page. And then on the way back, the subway then gets to the end of the line and then goes back. There could be other things that happen. Like you might have a middleware piece here that logs the request and then logs the response, just as an example. Or you might have middleware that validates the user authentication. And then on the way back, though, sets a cookie with, I don't know, their roles or their groups or something like that. So anyway, if you haven't done it, middleware is not new, like Node and a bunch of other frameworks use it. But .NET Framework, we did it a different way back then. I'm trying to remember, is it modules? I think it was, it's been a while since I've touched .NET Framework. I think it was modules. But anyway, so I'll show you that. Then what we're going to do is I created a custom class called Graph Email Client. And we're going to leverage dependency injection to get to this Microsoft graph. It's kind of like a proxy, if you will. It's a service client that you go through that, and it will then talk to Microsoft Graph. Super cool. Then we're going to use that Graph Email Client, and boom, we're going to render emails. So with that, let me go ahead and run off to the demo here. And let me run it first so you can kind of see it, and then we'll talk through the code. So I've already made sure it built and all that, although with demos, you'd be surprised how many times, like 5 minutes before the demo, I check it, and then I run it live and something goes wrong. And you're like, how is this possible? But it happens. Anyway, we're going to do .NET Run here. I'm in just VS Code. I'm actually on my Mac for this presentation. So I have my Windows machine right here, just so you know. Okay, so notice I get my URL here, which I could click, but I'm going to copy it because I want to make sure I'm not in this browser. I want to be in my tenant, my developer tenant browser. So we're going to paste that in. I'm hopefully already logged in because I did it right before I jumped on with Sam. All right, cool. Now look what it does. Permissions requested. Now you've all seen this with Android apps, iOS apps, maybe Office apps, right? That if you do much of that at work. But it wants to sign in and read my profile, read your presence info. I'm going to show you why I do that is because it was pretty easy to add is the short answer. Mailbox settings, the reason I need that is for time zone. Read your email, read your calendars, have full access to your files. Now that one may turn some folks off. It's unfortunate they don't say full access to your OneDrive for business files, because that's what it really means, not your whole hard drive files. That we probably should make that more clear. But and then maintain access to data you've given us access to, basically. So I'm logged in as an admin right now, so I could say, yeah, apply this to everybody, but I'm not gonna. I'm just gonna say accept, and then that should get us to the app here. All right, and there we go. Now the app homepage is super sophisticated. It literally shows my profile picture and then shows welcome Dan, gets that from that, remember that me/profile call? That just happened. Now up here, it is red. That's my presence info. Now, if I were to go to Teams and just really quickly change my status here. Okay, so let's see, what am I? I'm busy, so let's set myself back to available. It'll take just a sec. Now this one, I'm not doing live checks, so I'd have to refresh. Now I'm green. Okay, so that's reading my presence info just because I wanted to add it. And then of course I could sign out. So far, really it's just presence and profile. Super basic, right? But that's where the picture's coming from and stuff like that. Now, if I go to here though, notice I can get to email. Now this is fake email. And then I can page through the email. I can also get to calendar events. Now this is a fake account. Again, it's my Microsoft 365 developer tenant. So I literally, like an hour ago, just put in one, which is Cleveland.net user group talk, right? Which my time was 3 o'clock, and then I end at 4 o'clock, or well, whenever we get done. So that's reading from my calendar. In fact, if we go back to Teams, go to calendar, there it is right there. And if I drug this, well, I don't know if it'll let you drag it here. Yeah, let me edit it. Let's change this to like tomorrow. We'll pretend that today never happened, folks. Let's refresh. And what are we, 25th today? Okay, you can see, now it's the 26th. So it's reading live. And you can see it's pretty dang fast as well. And then I'm not gonna have time to go into the files, but I have really important files like bacon survey, like what types of bacon do you like? Turkey bacon qualifies, that's what my wife likes. Anyway, you can actually upload files, and this is actually integrating with OneDrive for Business. So again, although this is just listing, because that's what we got to start somewhere. Imagine that you're able to pull this type of data in and make it relevant to the context the user's working in. So again, they've been working with Acme Corp. You could pull in all the Acme Corp emails that are within the last, time frame, whatever that is. Pretty cool, actually. Same thing with calendar. Maybe you had a previous meeting. I'm only grabbing current meetings and into the future, but you could go back in history. Maybe you want to see when was the last time I met with them, because I probably need to follow up with something. Well, you could bring that right into the app. Or you're doing files that maybe you have a key, maybe every file starts with Acme Corp something, as an example, and you filter on that. Or maybe there's metadata in the file. You get the idea. So with that, that's kind of what the app does. Let me go ahead and close these guys. And let's go back and now talk about the code. All right, so let's start from scratch here. Now, the first thing I did was user secrets. And you'll see I have 2 user secrets here. Don't worry, yes, I know this is recorded, Sam, that's okay. That secret I will just kill off, and I'll make a new one just in case somebody on YouTube sees it. But this is my way of keeping that data out of my source code, not new. .NET Core's had this since it came out, pretty much since V1. So that's kind of the first thing is I went to Azure Active Directory, I set this up, And then I went in and I added these two user secrets, Azure AD client secret, Azure AD client ID. Okay, so that's kind of step one here. Now, if I open up app settings, there's some URLs that you would just get from the docs. When I built this sample and this learn content a while back, I literally just went to the docs for all this myself. But I want to show you this part. See this scopes right here? Remember when I logged into the app, I got that consent little pop-up and it had that list of, I want to get to your profile. I want to get to your OneDrive files. I want to get to your email, read only. I want to get to your calendar, read only. Well, that's right here. User read, presence read, mailbox settings read, mail read, calendars read, and files. And then because I can upload files, I did read write. Now, you're all used to permissions, but if you haven't done Microsoft 365, the way this is going to work is when the user logs in, Azure Active Directory is going to give them a token. And I'll show you the code in a moment that makes that happen. It's really cut and paste code, to be honest. You would not have to memorize it. That's why when I went to the page, it popped up right after I logged in, it popped up that consent because it said, hey, this app wants to get to this, this, and this. Is that okay? Now, if the user consents and accepts, it adds these scopes into the user token. Okay, and that token is then used in all the calls to Microsoft Graph. So if you call Microsoft Graph and try to read a user's email, well, if the token doesn't have mail.read, guess what's going to happen? It's going to fail. Likewise, if I had just files read, not read write, but just read, and I try to upload a file, it's going to fail because the user didn't consent to allowing that to happen to their OneDrive. So just like normal privileges, you have to set those up. We call them scopes. Once the user logs in and consents, these will go into, in essence, a token. And then every time Microsoft Graph is called, it will pass that token. All right. If the token's missing a scope and you try to call an API for that scope, you'll get an error. That's kind of how it works. Okay. So code-wise, let's close this guy down. Let's start at the beginning then. So you've seen I had to put in the AAD, client ID, and client secret. I had to define my scopes. I'll show you where those are red, by the way, in just a moment. So we're going to start at the beginning. We're going to go to Startup CS. Now, this is your normal ASP.NET Core startup file. Now, if you're doing .NET Framework and not doing much of this, don't worry about memorizing this because all the code's out there. You literally could take what I have and just tweak it, and you'd be good to go. If we come down into what's called configure services, okay, so this is the subway train thing. What we're going to do is first off, go grab what are our initial scopes. Well, this configuration get value downstream scopes. Let's go back to app settings, downstream API scopes. There we go. So what we're going to do is we're going to read the downstream API scopes. We're going to do a little split because they're comma or space separated. And then that's going to give us back our array. So now we have the scopes. That's what the application permissions the app needs. Now, from here, I'm going to walk you through this part really quick because honestly, if you said, hey, Dan, could you write that from memory, like by hand? Probably not. I know the general things you have to do, but I don't have all the APIs memorized because you write this once and you're good. But in the services, I'm going to first off add authentication capabilities. Now, the reason you didn't see me put in my username, password, and I have a two-factor code for this account is because before the meeting started today, I did that. I just didn't want you to see me mistype passwords. But that is what triggered the authentication piece. Now, the next thing is you saw, well, you didn't see this part, but you've all seen it where it'll prompt you for your username, password, and maybe your two-factor code. That would be this piece right here. But then notice this enable token acquisition to call downstream API, and look what's passed in, the scopes. What's our downstream API? So the user makes a call to the app, but then what's the app calling? Microsoft Graph. That's the downstream API. So what we're doing is we're setting the scopes so that when we call Microsoft Graph, the token that's passed will automatically have this array of scopes included. And that's all secured, by the way. It's not like you can hack them. So that way, when we make the call to get files, for example, since I have those permissions, it'll return the files. We're good to go. Next thing is we're going to add Microsoft Graph. Now, what this does is it adds, notice if we go back here, oops, right here, that's our base URL that we're going to call. You might recognize that from the Microsoft Graph Explorer demo I started off with tonight. So what we're doing is feeding it the base URL, and then this is going to set up dependency injection, which I'm going to show you next, actually. So now if we want to call Microsoft Graph API, we just inject this service client and just call the APIs on it. Call the email, call the files, call the calendar events, OneNote SAM if you want to do OneNote, all those. Now this last piece, don't worry about. There's for your token cache, you can store tokens in different areas. I'm doing in memory, which works for this demo. Now the last thing is we're just gonna, this little piece here, just make sure that every page in the whole app is secured so that if you try to go to that email page without logging in, it will force you to log in. That's all we're doing here is an authorization policy, and then we say, hey, let's add that. The rest is just normal Razor page type support and then Microsoft Identity. Okay, now this part here, I added a whole bunch of other stuff you could do. All right, all kinds of stuff you could do to get more details about when a request comes in and leaves, and you don't need it, which is why it's commented out. The last thing I want to show you is right here, though. Now, those that have done .NET Core, specifically ASP.NET Core, will know that I'm setting up dependency injection for my custom classes. So I have a profile client that gets my username, my picture, and the user status, presence, I should say, that you saw on the home page. I have an email client that's used on the email page, a calendar client on the calendar page, and then a files client for the files. Go figure. All I'm doing is making those so they're injectable into the page. Now, the reason I'm doing that is because I have a little graph folder here. Now, let's start at the profile, and I'll show you how easy this is to get started. Now, the hardest part about all this, by the way, is just the startup. But again, you could literally copy and paste what you see here to get started. You do not have to even go to the docs. You could just go straight to the repo, grab this code, and boom, you'd be off and running. And that's what I would do, quite honestly, because there is a little bit of code you can see here, and it's not code that any of us really have memorized. Well, maybe you do, but I don't. So I want in this graph profile client to be able to get the user's profile. Now, remember earlier when we were here, we did my profile and it brought back this JSON data. Let me move that up if I can. There we go. Okay, so it brought back like display name, given name, email, job title, you know, all this stuff. Well, I want to get to some of that data. And specifically, I want to get to the first name in essence. So let's do that. What I'm going to do is first off, I injected a logger just so I can log. That's optional. But see this guy right here? Graph Service Client. I'm injecting that because that is the proxy, if you will. This is the SDK part that Microsoft provides that allows me to then call the Graph API as long as I have a token. Now, here's how easy it is to use. So I'm going to assign that injected object up to this field called Graph Service Client. And then here's all I do. I have a little async method called getUserProfile. We take that little proxy object, say .me, make the request, but I only want to select the display name. Okay, the reason I'm doing that, of course, is it gives you email and given name and all this other metadata. Why bring that over the network if you're not going to use it, right? It's more efficient to just grab what you need. That's what that's what I'm doing here. And then get async, that kicks it off. So basically, we are doing that /me request, making the request, saying I only want to select the user's display name. All right, go do it. Now that will return the current user's display name. That's what I'm doing on the home page that you saw. Okay, pretty straightforward. Now let's move on down here. What about the profile image? Okay, those were all coming from Microsoft Graph. Well, on that one, I'm doing Graph Service Client, me, photo, but remember there was that dot value, or sorry, not dot, dollar value I showed when I did Graph Explorer. Well, with the API, it's me, photo, content. I don't want the photo JSON data. I want the raw bits and bytes of the image. And then I'm going to make the request async. Now, what that does is returns me back basically a stream. I'm going to convert that, you'll see, into a byte array. And then I'm going to feed that right to the page, because you can load that byte array right into an image tag if you haven't seen that before. I'm not going to have time to cover that, but if you go into the profile homepage here, which is index, I'll just show you really quick. Right there. So I'm saying the source of this image is a base 64 encoded byte array, and I'm getting that byte array from the user photo, which is retrieved from this call right here. Now the last thing is user presence. Okay, again, me, presence, make the request. Now this is going to return, are they available? Are they away, busy, offline, unknown, invisible, do not disturb, they're in a meeting. You get the idea. You've all probably seen some of this. So what I'm doing is just converting that to a CSS style here. And then I just apply the style, and that's what did that little circle around my user photo that you saw in the upper right, is the user presence. So you can see that first off, once you get the middleware done, it's actually not that hard to call into Microsoft Graph. Honestly, I think the hardest part is just getting the middleware right, but that's why we have this sample project for you. Okay, now let's look at email real quick, and then calendar events, and then we'll kind of wrap up and take questions. So if I want to get email, I made a separate class, Graph Email Client. It has a logger, and it has that proxy, that Graph Service Client. So we inject both of those. There we go. We store those in the field. And then here's what I have, get user messages. This is called by one of the Razor pages here called email. Okay, so we actually inject this guy into the page, and then it just calls, excuse me. Oh, geez, Sam, I told you I was going to get water. Guess what I did? I left my water downstairs. Oh, sometimes I'm not the brightest, folks. What can I say? Anyway,
if you want to take a 5, we can do that.
No, I'm good. I just laughed because I told you I was going to get some water, and I did, and I apparently didn't bring it back upstairs. I don't know where I put it. Anyway, it's fine. So graph service client.me.messages. That's all you got to do. Now remember, back on this guy, if we go down into my mail, me/messages, right? Same thing. It's just with the SDK APIs, it's me.messages. Now from there, we can make the request, but notice what I'm doing here. I don't know if you remembered earlier when I showed the email, there was a lot of data. Well, I don't need all that for this, demo app. I just need the subject, the body preview, and the receive date time. I'm going to order the results by receive date time to sending. I'm going to grab the top 10, and I'm going to do that async. Not that bad, right? I mean, it's very much like APIs you've all seen. It's just that now we're, instead of calling like a database through Entity Framework or something like that, we're actually calling into Microsoft Graph. Now, of course, you could do even more. Email's weird. You don't page email, it turns out, because think about what goes in your inbox. Is it just email? No. You have email, but you have calendar invites, and there's different things that can show up in your inbox. So paging's a little different. I do have how to do it in here if you're interested, but suffice it to say, luckily we have a little guy here called user messages collection request, and it'll let you pass in, get me the next set, get me the next set, get me the next set, and it'll skip all the stuff that's not email. So all the other like meetings and invites and all that fun stuff. It'll skip over that and just grab your email ultimately from Exchange. If you're using Microsoft 365. So here's another example of that. Same exact thing. It's just that if this is the first page, do what you already saw earlier. If it's not the first page, then we're going to go ahead and get the next batch, we call it. It's kind of like paging, but it's batching officially. So I have a little bit of code to handle that, which I won't bore you with because it's nothing exciting. Now, the last thing is calendar. Let's just look like, how would you get calendar information into your app? Same thing. We're going to inject the graph service client. And then now I do a little bit up here to set up. I'm querying the next, I think, 7 days. Yeah, right there. So I'm saying, let's go get from today out 7 days. So basically a week from now, any of those would be useful to us. So what I'm doing here is setting up a query option to say, hey, any queries I do moving forward, make sure that first off, we only get from today for the next 7 days, and then I could even add other options there. So it's kind of a way to pre-filter, if you will. Now, when I use the proxy here, .me, go to their calendar, request it, but see the view options? There's your view options. So you can kind of define it once that I only want to grab the next 7 days, pass it into the request. Now I'm doing some time zone stuff, don't worry about that, but look what I'm selecting. The subject of the calendar invite, or the calendar event, I should say, the organizer, and then the start and the end, as far as date time goes. Ordering that by start date time. It's really start dot date time technically, but if you go back to the JSON, this is what it looks like as far as the hierarchy goes. And then we do it async. So I hope that gives everybody an idea that, first off, this isn't rocket science. Like, it's actually pretty dang easy. So Sam, you asked about OneNote. Well, you should be able to do the exact same things. I'd have to play with that, Sam, but you should be able to do the exact same type of API to call into OneNote. Now, I'm going to say there are some APIs where you kind of have to go back to the raw REST type stuff. But just about all the main ones, you could use this type of approach right here. Pretty cool. Now, the last piece is the pages. All the pages do is inject these guys, and then just call get events, get messages, get user profile, get user image, whatever those methods are. Pretty cool. So that gets us kind of to the last little part here, and we just now walked through all of this. So, we had the app. I showed you we'd have to register an AAD. The middleware we talked about, that included the user secrets, a little bit of app settings, stuff like that, and then the middleware. We injected the graph service client into our graph email client, and then we use that to get the messages, and then we render them. And that's just looping. So that's part pretty easy. So let me jump out of here to, there's a few more slides, but I wanted to show you the code instead of just looking at slides are boring. I want to show you one more quick thing, and then we'll wrap up, and I'll stick around for any questions and stuff like that. Oh, this stupid thing. Okay, you know what? I have a backup. I have actual PowerPoint right here. Let me just jump to there. So I want to show you one more thing real quick that'll be in the slide deck. So we've already seen the Microsoft Graph Docs, we've seen Graph Explorer, but I want to show you one more option. Now, this is a JavaScript option, but obviously this works in .NET if you're doing web apps anyway. This is cool stuff. So just like there's a Graph Explorer, let me make that a little bigger. We have something called the Microsoft Graph Toolkit. And I think this is one of the coolest things out there if you're going to be using Microsoft Graph data. This will actually handle logging in for you, for example. You can add this little component, and it will automatically handle logging that user in and then showing their profile and their photo, just with that tag. And you could totally customize the tag. Here's a customization example. So mgt.dev. Let me chat this for you. mgt.dev. If you want to play with this. Oops. Okay. Now it gets better though. You want to see a user's agenda for their media events and stuff. Well, you could say MGT agenda, and look at this. It'll literally render their agenda. And then, of course, you can totally customize it. You can handle events. You can even do right to left if you want to do that. All kinds of properties and styles. Like you want dark theme, you can customize the heck out of it. Files. You want to work with files. There's an MGT file, and these are all web components, by the way. They're written in pure JavaScript. I mean, TypeScript behind the scenes, but they're JavaScript. And then all you have to do is just use it from there. And then you can go into here and figure out all the different file views. You can set icons. Like there's a custom icon for Microsoft Graph. And then the last one I want to show you is like the people picker. This one's really cool. If you've ever needed to look up people in the org and then select them and then do something. So Megan should be in here, I think. Yep, right there. And you could just add these, and then maybe, from the app, you get all their files, you send them an email, you do whatever, but you could do it right from the custom app. This is also pretty cool. The app I was telling you about that we did collaboration, we didn't use the people picker, but we did use the people component, and it would list all the people that had joined that collaboration app. And then notice as I click on these people, it even has the cards for the people. And you're all developers. Could we write this? Absolutely, we could. Do I want to write this? Heck no. I'll take this. I'll take adding that to my screen any day. So anyway, I want to show you that real quick because you don't always have to write like C#. If you're doing web apps, I would recommend take a look at the Microsoft Graph Toolkit because you could get started super quick and easy and embed this type of functionality right into your apps, if you need it. Obviously, not every app needs this, but. So with that, folks, I hope that gives you a pretty good idea kind of about what Microsoft Graph is, what you can do. And I'm going to wrap up by tying back to my story at the beginning. I didn't recognize at the time how much rich functionality organization-wise when it comes to data there was. I didn't ever use this. I admit it. I didn't. I will say I did a consulting project for Microsoft years later, though, that was based on the early versions of this, but it was for a different purpose, so it didn't really count. But I hope you can see that it opens up this whole new world because it's like every day we work with business data. Well, why don't our apps take advantage of this business data, right? And so, going back to wrap up my story here, I was helping companies, and when I say companies, big companies, Intel, JB Hunt. I worked a lot with JB Hunt, and they were working on really robust apps. Well, why not tie in that organizational data into the apps where appropriate? Obviously, it's not needed everywhere, but there's so many use cases where we could actually make our users even more productive if they knew that, oh, you already sent an email about this, or you already have a file that relates to this. So anyway, I saw a chat come in. Dan, I missed a few minutes and joined developer tenant. No problem. Yeah, in fact, let me just wrap up. I won't even run the slide. I'll just say this. I personally, and I say this with my Dan Wahlin hat, let's take off my Microsoft hat, all right? I just have my Nike logo today. I didn't wear a Microsoft shirt. I really think this is one of those untapped opportunities in custom internal apps. Now, external, it would depend on what you're doing there, but internal, there's just so much cool stuff you can do with this. I mean, even if you're not a developer, you're like doing DevOps, IT admin stuff. You could even use Microsoft Graph when someone gets hired to add them to the proper Teams channels, add them into Azure Active Directory, add them into the proper groups. You could automate all that by using Microsoft Graph calls. I mean, granted, you're probably using PowerShell, but you could even do PowerShell with Microsoft Graph. So pretty cool. So anyway, I would kind of challenge everybody, think through, are you maximizing the org data that's out there in the current apps you're working on, if it's appropriate? Reduce your user context switching. Bring the data where they're already working. Don't make them jump somewhere else. The apps are secured through the normal Microsoft identity, super ironclad, hundreds of millions of people use it every day. And then you can encapsulate, like you saw me make those email class, and you could make a OneNote class, SAM, and other classes to encapsulate that functionality. And now you could just reuse it. You can build up your own little library, or maybe you build up your own APIs that call Microsoft Graph so that your whole org could use this if secured. So the last thing I'll say is, if you're interested, go through this learning path. It has 3 modules. Again, email, calendar events, and files. There's more we could have done, but those were some of the common ones. And they will walk you through every single little piece of what you would have to do to make this work. And that's it. So to answer your question now, sorry, Yogesh, hopefully I'm saying that close to right. Yeah, so if you want to get a free developer tenant, I could look up the URL, but I'll tell you the easiest way is go to this link here, because there is a web page for it. But if you go to this link here, this will get you to Graph Explorer, which we covered earlier. And then click on Developer Program, Join Now. In fact, here's the direct link. And it's totally free to join. They basically, if you don't use it, like I keep mine active, because it's not like I'm doing Microsoft Graph every single day for my job. I bounce around a bunch of tech. But mine, luckily, I use it enough that it just keeps carrying over. What they'll do is they'll extend it as long as it's being used. Otherwise, it'll just kind of get deleted eventually. So yeah, just go sign up here. It's totally free. It's literally like having your own. You get Microsoft Teams, you get Microsoft Office, Microsoft Graph, everything that Microsoft 365 pretty much has to offer. I think it's a E5 or something like that subscription. I'd have to look, but yeah, right there. It's an E5. That's the licensing level subscription. So you also get sample data they include and all that. In fact, when I went to Teams, you might not have seen it, Yogesh. This is Teams, full on Teams, but with my developer tenant. That's where I went in to change the my Cleveland event there. Full on just normal Teams, chat, Teams, all that fun stuff. Pretty cool. So with that, folks, I hope that gets you started. So let me know if you have any questions, and otherwise I think I'll switch back to here. If you want to reach out, here we go. You can reach out there. If you're not on Twitter, in fact, here, I'll just give you my my Microsoft. Yeah, feel free to, I don't want to put that one in the email or the YouTube per se, but for you folks, it's fine. Feel free, if you have a project like this, feel free to reach out. Be happy to get in touch with the right folks. So, all right, Sam, I'll turn it back over to you. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, Dan. Highly appreciate it. There was a question, I think you might have missed it, from Dimitri.
Oh, okay, sorry. Let me scroll up.
Scroll up a little bit.
Let me see here. Oh, yeah, there we go. I see it. I work for the county. I used to work for county here in Arizona. That was my second job out of college, actually. It was one of my best jobs I ever had. But anyway, and we have residents logging in and submitting their information. Okay, yep, we had that too. County workers log in and work with the information submitted by residents. We're currently looking at different real-time chat options. Okay, and integrating with Teams. So Microsoft Graph now I'll give you 2 options here. So yes, there is a Microsoft Graph chat. I would have to go look up the SDKs for that. Let's see if we can, how quick. I don't know that it's in the Graph Explorer yet, but let's see. I don't remember that one being here, but we could find it. Now you can create a chat, but that's not it. No, that's a chat in Teams. There's actually a chat API though. See if we can find that. It's new. Okay, this is all Teams related. Yeah, I'd have to dig in. This is probably also to Teams. Well, you can look at this one. I'll put it in the chat, but I'd have to find the actual page I'm looking for, which I'm not finding right now. Let me see if this is the one, if this is the Teams one, or no, this might be it actually. I'd have to dig in. It kind of looks like Teams to me, but I'd have to dig in. But anyway, yeah, so that is one option. Now, another one is this. I'll give you another kind of playground link if I can find it here. Give me one sec. This ties into Sam asked about SMS. Well, there's also chat. So this is Azure Communication Services, and I want to find right here, UI library. And then I've done about 6 or 7 videos now. I don't know that we've done one on just chat yet, but we do talk about how you could do chat in these videos. So if you're interested, they're up on YouTube. So here is the ACS homepage, and then the one I want to show you is this one. All right, so let me zoom it. So this is Azure Communication Services. This is full-on audio, video, SMS, telephony, chat, email. You can even send email through this. Any communication pretty much you could think of, you could use ACS. It's very new, by the way. It's only maybe a year or so, and for some of these GA releases. So like for instance, I could literally set up a call with you guys, just like we're doing now in this mechanism. What are we in? GoToMeeting or something like that? We could do the same exact thing, but 100% custom. Now I'd have to go set up some stuff to demo this, but if I go down, here is chat, and they'll actually show you kind of how to get started. Notice there's this chat composite. I'll put this link in for you so you have the direct one. And this would be one option. Graph also has a chat option, and these are kind of starting to all tie together. You can actually set up an ACS chat that integrates with a Teams chat if you want it. Now, you probably don't want that with your county residents, but kind of cool. Or you could make it where your county residents could literally, if they were having a problem with some system and you have service reps at a help desk, could literally do an audio video call in so they could show them what's going on. Like maybe it's I don't know, if you do power at the county, probably not, but you get the idea. So lots and lots of cool stuff. Check that out. So hopefully that helps. And let me see, did I catch your whole question there? Yeah, so MS Graph would be a viable one. I would just need to find that feature page. Or you could use ACS. In fact, if we go back to here, I'll just show you really quick. Most of the quick starts have a C# option. There we go. I'll give you this quick start right here. So there's the link to this one. And then we'll actually walk you through setting up the app. And then down here, here's how you kind of hook into Azure Communication Services. You have to go to the Azure portal to add that. And then how to start a chat thread and all that fun stuff. And it's full on real-time chat. You could totally do and embed it in a web page. That's what it's for. So cool, excellent question. What's crazy about that, Dimitri, is I think about when now granted, I was in my early 20s. I told you it was my second job out of school. And like back then, we didn't even have WebSockets back then. And so like, I'm trying to think, well, back then we used to use Java applets. That's how old this is. You used to embed Java applets in web pages for real-time stuff. It was, this is way back in the day. This is like late 90s, early 2000s, something like that. And I'm sitting here going, how crazy is it that literally in less than probably 30 minutes, you could go through this quick start and literally embed real-time chat into your app in like 30 minutes. Crazy. I'm reminiscing. That's how old I'm getting, folks. All
We've certainly
right.
come a
Any other
long
questions?
way.
Yeah, we've come a long way since the 90s. It was totally cool to have blue cloud backgrounds on your web pages or granite, granite stone. I used to do that. But anyway, all
Another
right.
question for you, going off of the ACS and cell communications. What about like cell apps like Telegram, WhatsApp, and Facebook Messenger? Is there a way to tie into those as well?
Those, not that I know of. I suspect most of those probably have some type of a web hook, I bet, that you could maybe hook in through that. But they would have to expose some type of API that we could call. Now, if they
Hmm.
did, and I'm assuming some of them probably do, like I'm pretty sure iMessage probably doesn't, right? Because Apple just tends to, I don't know, lock things down a bit more. Um, I could be wrong. Maybe iMessage does have that, and I just don't know about it. But um, for WhatsApp, if you could find an API, I would bet you could pipe it into that. I haven't done that though.
Okay. I was just curious if there was something available for it that you knew of. But
Not
no
from
problem.
us. Yeah, not today through Microsoft. But again, I'd be willing to bet if we did a quick search on GitHub or something, somebody probably has a project out there about that.
I gotcha. Okay. Very cool presentation, Dan. That's really informative and some really cool features.
Well, cool, cool. Well, thanks. I'll stop sharing here. And in case anybody does want the slides, Sam, as soon as we're done here, I'll email you the slides and you can post them wherever you want. That's fine.
Sounds
So,
great. In the meantime, does anyone have any questions for Dan? Any additional questions or comments, I should say? All right. If not, I posted some links into the blog, which we'll cover in just a little bit. So let me go ahead and share my screen again. All right. So thanks again to Dan for a great presentation. Didn't know that Microsoft Graph was capable of all these features. But as mentioned earlier, the recording of this presentation will be posted on YouTube. And it's going to take me a couple days to edit it and upload it. However, the link is available in chat. If you would please subscribe to the channel. That way you get immediate notifications once the video is uploaded. In addition, we're going to be covering tech events in just a little bit, and those will be posted on my blog, samnasser.blogspot.com. And you can also subscribe there to get updates as well. And then last but not least is the link to the feedback eval forms. If you would, please take a few minutes, fill that out so we can provide Dan with some constructive criticism and some feedback.
that'd be
Once
great.
again, I'd like to thank Manning.com for the 35% offer. And the discount code for that is MTPCLEC21. And the link is available in chat for that. As for technical events, coming up on the first Tuesday of every month is the Ohio North Database Training Group. They cover a variety of topics related to SQL Server, as well as Azure SQL. And on September 6th, they're going to be having a presentation on the Azure Data Factory. And then going along the lines of Azure, on September 14th, which is the second Wednesday of the month, is the Azure Cleveland User Group. And we're going to be meeting every second Wednesday at 6 p.m. online. On the third Thursday of the month is the Great Lakes Users Group.net, which has been meeting online and will continue to do so in the foreseeable future. Topic has not been posted yet, but they will be meeting on September 15th. And last but certainly not least, September 22nd, which is the fourth Thursday, that is the September meeting of this group. And we're going to be having Matt Groves from Columbus talking about Couchbase and using that for caching and .NET applications. As for conferences, November 8th through the 11th is Tech Bash 2022. That's going to be happening in the Poconos in Pennsylvania, and the link for that is techbash.com. One of the things that we always like to do is discuss job openings. So Tech Systems always has jobs posted at techsystems.com/IT-jobs. In addition, always like to ask who's hiring and who's looking for work. So if you're looking for someone to hire in your place of employment, or if you're looking to change jobs, please make yourself known either by chat or verbally. Anyone in the job market? Anyone looking for someone in the job market?
Yeah, Sam, this is Rick Harris. We've got quite a few positions open at Meyer right now. Meyer IT positions. Meyer is 100% remote if anybody's interested, if you live in the 6-state footprint of Meyer, which includes Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Indiana, Illinois, and Kentucky. So I would say go. I'm going to share the link. It's just 1 second here. I think this will work, but otherwise just go to jobs.meyer.com and then look for corporate jobs and then look down at the bottom. There's quite a few positions open right now for Azure, CI/CD people, DevOps, but we've got just on my own department alone, which is responsible for the e-commerce site, I think there's about 5 or 6 developer or senior developer positions open.
Oh, very nice. Thanks for sharing that. And Yogesh is looking for any part-time jobs. Anyone have a part-time job available that they know of? If something comes up, please feel free to share it, and I'll make my contact information available, which kind of takes us to our next slide. So my email, snasser@nistechnologies.com. You can also find me on Twitter @SamNasser. And my blog is samnasser.blogspot.com, where links to job openings as well as the variety of links that we posted in chat are going to be available there, with exception of Dan's email. We'll keep that private. And last but not least, I invite you to connect with me on LinkedIn. And so with that, if there's no questions or additional comments, I thank you all for attending and look forward to seeing you all next month. Have a great night, everyone.
Great to talk with you all. Have a good one. Bye. Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Dan.
See ya.